Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast, Mayday, what's your location? Get the pedal out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, I need water in that 2.5-inch line. 48 inch water to the 2.5-inch line. Give me a rope, give me a rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Today is another one of our episodes reviewing an LODD to learn lessons from these tragic events and try to prevent them from happening in the future. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to recognize Assistant Chief Zachary Paris and Firefighter Martin Gruber of the new Tripoli Fire Department, who died last week at a structure fire in Pennsylvania. Rest easy, brothers. I think the funeral information was out on the secret list and everything recently in the last couple of days about that, if anyone's interested. I'm sure it'll be live streamed. Joined today, I'm Doug. I'm joined today by Paul and Zach. Dirk can't make it because he's working today. Well, how are things, Paul?
Hey, great. Really good. Happy to be here doing another podcast this week of a significant event in the modern fire service. I just wanted to say, you mentioned the secret list there, and hopefully all our listeners know about firefighterclosecalls.com, which tracks all close calls that firefighters have and posts them and stuff like that. And then it's also the home of the secret list, which is you can subscribe to emails to get notification of any firefighter line of duty deaths and any pertinent information about them. And I believe it's run by Gordon Graham and who's the other guy? Hey?
Gordon Graham.
Billy Goldfeder.
Yeah, Gordon Graham is the
Right.
silent money behind the project, and
Right.
Goldfeder runs it, yeah.
Right, yeah. So just something to be aware of in case our listeners aren't aware of it. But, I mean, if you're listening to the podcast, you probably are.
The most famous mustache in the fire service.
Billy Goldfeder.
Legendary. It's legendary.
Yep. I still like Gordon Graham and his presentations, and he does the overheads, and he writes all the notes, and it's all scribbles.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
Zach, how are things?
They're good. Just got in from doing Christmas shopping and just trying to get stuff ready here before I go back up to work again. So that was a good day.
Tis the season.
Yeah, I got to go Christmas shopping this afternoon after we podcast with my daughter for my wife's stuff.
Fun times. Well, I'm officially done vacation. I'm on 6 off now, but back to work in the weekend. I was never really off because I worked a bunch of extra shifts, but back in time for Christmas, and yeah, it'll be good. Kind of looking forward to going back to my routine life instead of not routine life. Anyways, we better get on to the incident today because this is probably going to be a long one. We're going to do as we're in December, we try to keep the month of when events happen. We're going to do the Worcester Cold Storage Warehouse in Worcester, Massachusetts. It's always hard to say. Which happened on December 3rd, 1999, which resulted in 6 line-of-duty deaths, which, being pre-9/11, was a pretty high number of LODDs there. Still would be, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, more than Charleston and
I don't know how many Charleston was 9.
Yeah, and Hackensack. But it was before Charleston, so
yeah.
Yeah,
I think it was like one of the most since like way back a fire in New York.
I think so.
That. Yeah. I mean, I was 12 years old, so I can't say that I really remember the fire service life at that time, but just look back on it all.
I was a volunteer part-time on call with Lacombe back in 99.
Yeah.
I started in 94 in Lacombe.
Yeah, 94.
Yeah, 94.
I was 6 years old or something like that.
I was just being born.
Probably a lieutenant.
Right after your beloved Habs won the Stanley Cup, you moved to Lacombe and joined the fire.
Hey, yeah.
Okay, like I said, December 3rd, 1999, 6 career firefighters died after they became lost in a 6-floor maze-like cold storage and warehouse building while searching for 2 homeless people and fire extension. It is presumed that the homeless people had accidentally started a fire on the second floor sometime between 16:30 and 17:45 hours and then left the building. Lots of reports say that they knocked over a candle into a pile of clothes and then couldn't put the fire out themselves, and they left and didn't tell anybody. An off-duty police officer was driving by, called Central Dispatch, and reported smoke was coming from the top of the building. When the first alarm was struck at 18:15, the fire had been in progress for 30 to 90 minutes. Common theme, just like our last one, delay in notifying everybody. Beginning with the first alarm, a total of 5 alarms were struck over a span of 1 hour and 13 minutes. With the fifth alarm called in at 19:28 hours. Responding were 16 apparatus, including 11 engines, 3 ladders, 1 rescue, and 1 aerial scope. A total of 73 firefighters, 2 incident commanders in IC1 and IC2 in 2 separate cars also responded. And I think I saw other places that, like, the chief of the department came, so maybe they were there and never took command, so they were never counted as IC or anything. But I know mutual aid and stuff. I don't know if these numbers count the mutual aid or just count the Worcester units, but I know the pictures, there's lots of units there. So the fire department involved in the incident at the time served a population of about 170,000 in a geographic area of 40 square miles, had 479 uniformed personnel and 12 fire stations. The fire department required 480 hours of training, which included 80 hours of hazardous materials training, a written test to become certified as firefighter 1 and 2. The training is designed to cover personal safety, forcible entry, ventilation, fire apparatus, ladders, SCBA, hose loads. I mean, basically your NFPA 1001, level 1 and 2. CPR, first aid, aerial operations, water and ice rescue, scuba diving, and electrical emergencies. The 6 victims had 12 years, 5 months, 2 years, 1 month, 8 years, 9 months, 16 years, 5 months, 20 years, 3 months, and 27 years of firefighting experience, respectively. So one guy had 2 years, but everybody else was over 8. They were pretty experienced firefighters to get trapped in this.
The size of the city, just relate to it a little bit, I guess, for our Canadian friends, probably like Saskatoon or Regina, a little smaller than they are today, but what they were maybe 10 years ago for Western Canada.
I think it's at the time was the second biggest city in Massachusetts there, right behind Boston, which would be exponentially bigger.
Right.
But, yeah. So the event, as we said, December 3rd, 1999, at 18:13 hours, an off-duty police officer reported smoke coming from the top of a building at 236 Franklin Street. At 18:15, dispatch advised all companies strike and box 1438 Franklin and Arctic Streets for 236 Franklin Street. That's East Coast lingo with box alarms and cross streets and all that. Engine 1, what's that?
The way it should be.
Yeah, the old school way. Yeah. Engines 1, 6, 12, and 13 responded. Ladders 1 and 5, and rescue 1. The city has 1 rescue. They probably go to every fire. Car 3, which included the first incident commander and his aide. Engine 1 has an aide. Yeah, looking back at Baltimore, just introducing aides for all their chiefs after that report. Engine 1 was the first to arrive on scene at 18:16 hours, so that's pretty good response. Took them a minute. Reported heavy smoke showing. 18:17. Central Dispatch advised all companies that the correct address was 266 Franklin Street. I'm sure this would have been a very easy building to find, regardless of what address you were given. It took the whole block up.
Massive.
The structure was a cold storage and warehouse building that had been vacant since 1991. I saw some other reports that listed like as early as 1987 it was vacant since, so it was vacant for a while. The original building was constructed in 1905. 7 years later, 1912, another building was constructed on the western or delta side. The building constructed in 1905 was designated as Building A. The side constructed in 1912 was referred to as Building B. The entire building contains 6 floors above ground for a total of 94,176 square feet and a full basement. The exterior walls, constructed of brick, measured 18 inches thick. The interior walls were covered with 6 to 18 inches of asphalt impregnated cork, depending on the floor level, 4 inches of polystyrene and or foam glass, and a thin layer of glass board. The flooring was wooden except for the flooring in the basement, the first and second floors, which were concrete. The joists consisted of heavy timbers. 2 stairwells were present. One was located on the Bravo side and extended from the basement to the flat roof. The other was located on the Charlie side and extended to the 3rd floor only. 2 sets of freight elevators were present, one on the Bravo side, other on the Charlie side, and both were adjacent to stairwells. 2 loading dock areas existed. One was located on the Bravo side, while the other was located on the Charlie side. 6 windows were present on the 2nd floor level, 3 on the Alpha side and 3 on the Delta side of Building B. But they had been covered with plywood. Window openings which were present in the stairwell on the Bravo side were also covered with plywood, although the building entrances and exits that had been secured by plywood since 1991, homeless people had gained access to the building and established living quarters, which is very common. IC-1 arrived on scene at 1819 and requested to Central Dispatch to strike a second alarm for box 1438, Franklin and Arctic Street for 266 Franklin Street, due to the size of the building. And there's a book written about this, 3000 Degrees it's called, and this chief had mentioned like 2 weeks before this fire was driving down the street with his wife and said, "This building scares the shit out of me," quote unquote. So he was forecasting what was about to come unbeknownst to him. Second alarm companies consisted of Engine 2 and 16, Aerial Scope 2, and Car 2, which later became Incident Commander 2. As the second alarm companies arrived on the scene, they were directed by IC-1 to stage under a nearby interstate overpass. At 1820, IC-1 radioed Central Dispatch and requested any available building information, but no information was ever found or received. There's a note: due to the lack of pre-fire planning and inspection and a lack of building plans and drawings, confusion existed amongst the firefighters as to the configuration and number of floors contained within the building. I remember the book mentioned that from the outside there was no way at all to tell how many floors there was. IC-1 then entered the building through a doorway from the 1st floor ground level on the Alpha side and proceeded up the stairs to the 2nd floor, where he conducted interior building operations. Simultaneously, his aide circled the building to conduct a scene survey. The aide reported that he was on the Charlie Delta corner of the building and he saw heavy fire burning in and up the elevator shafts. When Engine 1, Ladder 1, and Rescue 1 arrived on scene, on the first alarm, they all split up into crews. Engine 1's crew comprised of a captain and 1 firefighter who entered the building looking for extension, while the other 2 firefighters from Engine 1 remained at the apparatus to set it up. I'm assuming establish a water supply, setting up an engine. Ladder 1's company split into 2 crews. 1 crew proceeded to the roof while the other checked for fire extension. Rescue 1, which was comprised of a lieutenant and 4 firefighters, including victims 1 and 2, split into 2 two-man crews while the driver remained with the apparatus. At 1822, Engine 13, who also came on the first alarm, reported fire in the elevator shaft on the 2nd and 3rd floors on the Charlie Delta corner. It doesn't say that they were directed to do anything, but they got
It's kind of funny. Firefighters are so polite, right? Okay, so we're respectful. We got this building that's been vacant for 10 years or 8 years. We know it's vacant. We know people are going and hanging out in there. We're not sure how big and how tall it is. You'd think someone would take a spray bomb and write, 6 floors on this side, 3 floors on that side, whatever. But we would never do that, right? Because it's like respect for someone else's property.
Yeah.
But if an engine company would have done that long ago in your area familiarization,
then you get in trouble for vandalizing, though.
yeah, exactly.
Chiefs give you a stern talking to. So Ladder 1 in a freezer room on the 2nd floor reported they had a room full of fire. They requested a line be brought in. IC-1 ordered a 2.5-inch line from Engine 1 and a 2.5-inch line from Engine 16 to be laid to the elevator shaft on the second floor at the Charlie Delta corner. So yeah, I mean, lots of our podcasts we talk about how they didn't bring the big line. This one they brought two big lines, so at least they knew they weren't in a house. They were preparing to fight a big fire in a big building.
Yep, which is
An inch
awesome.
and a quarter line from engine 1 and a 2.5-inch line from engine 12 and a 2.5-inch line from engine 6 had been laid to the second and third floors through the stairwell on the Bravo side. And active firefighting began. The line from engine 6 had been laid to the third floor, and since no fire was found there, the line was not charged. At 1826 hours, IC1 was advised that 2 homeless people might be in the building. I saw that a business owner from next door alerted the fire department that people were in the building. Car 2, which was the second incident commander, and his aide arrived on the scene at 1831 hours. IC2 assumed command and was positioned on the outside of the Alpha Bravo corner of the building. He requested a status report from IC1, who was now the interior commander conducting interior operations, and he was told that heavy fire was burning on the second and third floors in Building B, and that 2 homeless people might have been in the building. The crew from Engine 1, captain and firefighter, entered the building from the Bravo side loading dock and joined one of the crews from Rescue 1 who had entered the building from the Alpha side first floor ground level stairway. The 2 crews, which included victims 1 and 2 from Rescue 1, met at the stairwell on the first floor. They all proceeded up the stairwell and observed the other crew from Rescue 1 enter the third floor. You're going to see how confusing it was about who was on what floor here when, I mean, we're reading it and we're going to lose track of it all. Never mind being there, not knowing what story you're on or where anybody is.
Yeah, and kind of seeing a crew off in the distance. Okay, I think that's so and so, and they're going there.
Yeah.
And of course, they're all split up into groups of 2 from their apparatus, where they came at 4 or 5 per unit, but they're split up.
Which I think is a common kind of East Coast thing where you have predetermined tasks from your rig and you just go do them. You don't always stay together as a crew. I think that's more of a West Coast or Canada thing that you always all stay together.
It's a blue card thing.
There you go.
There it is. I was
Way
waiting
to
for
go,
Paul.
Zach.
I was waiting for Paul.
Yeah.
There's no
I
such thing
didn't
as
say
blue
it.
card east of the Mississippi. In 1999 especially.
No. Fire command in action back then.
Engine 1's crew and the 2 victims from Rescue 1 continued to the roof via the stairwell. Once on the roof, they proceeded to the Charlie Delta corner where they joined a crew from Ladder 1. The victims from Rescue 1 reported to Interior Command that they were on the roof and had heavy smoke and embers showing. The crews cleaned out a skylight measuring 15 square feet, which was located over the elevator shaft, and Ladder 1 reported that the skylight was completely vented and that hot embers were coming through. The 3 crews, which is Engine, Ladder, and Rescue 1, then left the roof, returned to the stairwell, and descended the stairs. Engine 1's crew were in the lead down the stairs, and they returned to the first floor. Ladder 1's crew descended the stairs after Engine 1's crew and entered the second floor from the stairwell on the Bravo side. Victims 1 and 2 from Rescue 1 entered the 6th floor and began a top-down search and rescue sweep and fire extension check. After conducting the search and rescue sweep and fire extension check, they exited the 6th floor and entered the 5th floor. Simultaneously, the other crew from Rescue 1, which was Lieutenant and 1 firefighter, left the 3rd floor and went to the 4th floor, while Ladder 1's crew took the 2nd floor. So they all split up and said, we'll all take a floor and we'll search it. You go top down, we'll go bottom up, we'll meet in the middle. The search and rescue crews were not using search ropes due to the light to moderate smoke conditions. Heavy, black, acrid smoke suddenly filled the 2nd floor, causing all crews on the 2nd floor to become disoriented and lose sight of one another. Ladder 1's crew conducted a right-hand search and eventually found the doorway that opened into the stairwell. They descended the stairwell until they found Interior Command, who was now located between the 2nd and the 3rd floors in the stairwell. Interior Command relocated to the bottom of the 2nd floor stairwell and ordered a head count. It was determined that the 2 firefighters from Rescue 1 were missing. You'd think they have a better name for Interior Command and Incident Command because they're still both IC.
Right, yeah,
It'll get
and
me
that comes
confused.
up in the
Yeah.
recommendations later too. It didn't say if they talked on the radio in the report as far as, okay, we're doing third floor, you guys go to fourth floor, we're doing
Well,
it. They didn't
they were all
talk about
together
that
face to face though, so I'm sure they all just discussed
in
face
the
to face.
stairwell.
You go here, we're going there. Let's go, and then they went. But they didn't tell command maybe where they were going.
Right, it doesn't mention it.
So the aide for Interior Command, without wearing an SCBA, went to the fourth floor and stayed in the stairwell, yelling to no avail for the missing firefighters. At 1834, IC number 2, who was Incident Command, radioed the lieutenant from Rescue 1 requesting his location and inquiring whether the primary and secondary searches for any civilians were completed. The lieutenant responded they had checked the third floor and were advancing up the stairwell to another floor. He reported no fire but heavy smoke. The lieutenant and firefighter from Rescue 1 proceeded to the fourth floor and were checking a room when visibility dropped to nearly zero. They were running low on air, so they left the room, descended the stairs, and returned to an apparatus to change air bottles. While they were changing air bottles, the driver told them that 2 firefighters from Rescue 1 were lost. The lieutenant and firefighter re-entered the building and, believing they were going to the fourth floor, instead went to the third floor because they thought the building only had 5 floors. Using search ropes now, they searched on an area on the third floor all the way back to a door opening through the firewall which separated the 2 buildings, but did not encounter the victims. At 1841 hours, Interior Command radioed Central Dispatch to make the following broadcast. All companies working inside the structure use extreme caution. There may be holes in the floor and the building may be extremely unsafe. At 1842, IC number 2 requested that a third alarm be struck due to heavy fire conditions. Dispatch struck a third alarm. Engines 3, 7, and ladder 2 responded. At 1847, 1848, respectively, one of the victims from Rescue 1 made the following 2 radio transmissions. Rescue to command. I need help on the floor below the top floor of the building. We are lost. Rescue to command. We need help on the 4th floor. At 1849, IC number 2 had Central Dispatch clear the radio channel for emergency traffic, and another radio transmission was heard from one of the victims. We have an emergency, command. We are 2 floors down from the roof. This is the rescue company. Come now, 2 floors down from the roof. Guys, not the top floor, 1 floor down. A short time later, radio contact was made with the victims to determine their status. One of the victims replied, "We need air, we need air. I'm sharing a tank off of me right now. We are lost. You need to send a rescue team up here for us. 2nd floor down from the roof, 2 floors down. We were on the roof and then we checked the next floor. Now we're on the next one. Hurry." At 1853 hours, Engine 13 reported that the conditions inside the building were deteriorating very quickly. IC number 2 requested a 4th alarm and that the chief of department be notified. At 1854, IC number 2 radioed Interior Command that a 4th alarm had been struck and asked for verification of the floor the 2 firefighters were trapped on. Interior Command responded, "They are on the 2nd floor from the top, 2 floors down from the roof. I have ladder 2, engine 3, and ladder 1 all going looking for them." At 1855 and 1856, Interior Command made the following 2 requests. Rescue 1, activate your pass alarm so we can hear you. Activate your emergency alarm. Activate your pass emergency alarm. At 1857, one of the victims radioed back, "They are activated." It gives you a sense of how big this building is, that their pass alarms are beeping and nobody can hear them.
Right, yeah.
And all this talk about them being lost, I saw somewhere on the interior doors, the doorknobs were flush against the wall. So as they were in a room searching and they wall looking, sweeping the
Wouldn't feel
wall,
it.
you wouldn't feel the doorknob. So that added to the problems.
Absolutely, yeah. Being a specialty building,
Yeah.
right?
When engines 3, 7, and ladder 2 arrived on the scene for the 3rd alarm, the engines were staged on the Alpha Delta corner, and ladder 2 was staged on the Alpha side of the building. The companies were instructed to proceed to command at the front at the Alpha Bravo corner of the building. Ladder 2's company consisted of a lieutenant and 3 firefighters. The driver stayed with the truck, while the lieutenant and 2 firefighters proceeded to the command post. At the command post, they received orders to conduct search and rescue operations on the 5th floor. They proceeded to the dock doors on the Bravo side and entered the building. The lieutenant and 1 firefighter from Ladder 2, victims 3 and 4, were the first up the stairwell while the 3rd firefighter followed. At the 3rd floor level, the trailing firefighter joined a firefighter from Engine 3 who had become separated from his crew. The 2 firefighters began knocking out the plywood covering the window on the 3rd floor. After knocking out that plywood, they went to the 4th floor and knocked out the plywood in that window. Some would argue that this guy from Engine 3 that lost his crew should have called his own mayday.
Right, exactly. But they're so used to working independently.
Yeah, and they probably had bigger fish to fry looking for the 2 missing guys.
Right.
They ascended the stairwell to the 5th floor where they thought they would meet up with the lieutenant and the firefighter from Ladder 2, but almost 10 minutes had passed without seeing them. They assumed that the lieutenant and the firefighter had entered the room. The lower alarm sounded on the SCBA warned by the firefighter from Ladder 2, so he and the firefighter from Engine 3 returned to the 1st floor. While on the 1st floor at 19:06 hours, the firefighter from Ladder 2 radioed the lieutenant from Ladder 2 and requested his location. The lieutenant replied, "We came up the stairwell. We were on the 5th floor." He asked the lieutenant, "What is your location on the 5th floor?" The lieutenant replied, "Good question."
Not good.
He asked the lieutenant to repeat the message. The lieutenant replied, "We are doing a sweep. I believe we are in the front part of the building." At 19:10 hours, the lieutenant from Ladder 2 radioed command. "Chief, get a company up the stairwell to the 5th floor. We can't locate the stairwell, or give us some sign as which way to go. We are running low on air and we want to get out of here." At 19:14 hours, the victims from Ladder 2 radioed again requesting the following: "Send someone up the stairwell to the 5th floor and stand in the doorway and start yelling. We can't find the door." The crew from Engine 3, no victims, responded, "We have the message and we're going to the 5th floor." Although the crew from Engine 3 located the doorway on the 5th floor at 19:19 hours, they did not make contact with the victims from Ladder 2. Engine 3's company consisted of a lieutenant and 4 firefighters, including victims 5 and 6. Before leaving the engine, the lieutenant told the company they were going to be used for search and rescue operations and that they would be entering the building. According to a predetermined plan, the company split into 2 crews, one consisting of the lieutenant and 2 firefighters, the other consisting of the senior firefighter and a junior firefighter, victims 5 and 6. When they both exited the truck, one crew ran to the command post, while the second, victims 5 and 6, finished putting their gear on. When the Engine 3 crew arrived at command, 2 other crews were already there, 3 members from Ladder 2 and 3 members from Engine 7. Working in crews of 3 or 4, they were instructed to use ropes while looking for the 4 missing firefighters. The lieutenant from Engine 3 received instructions to take air bottles up the stairwell and try to locate victims 1 and 2 who were supposedly on the 4th floor. The lieutenant and 2 firefighters each grabbed an air bottle and proceeded up the Bravo stairwell to what they thought was the 4th floor. The 3rd firefighter became separated from the crew while going up the stairwell. So this is the guy the other guy found.
Mm-hmm.
Once at the 3rd floor, the lieutenant and 1 firefighter entered the room and began their search. Visibility was about 1.5 feet vertically off the floor and about 5 feet horizontally along the floor. So basically, you couldn't see anything. While they were searching the 2 rooms, which were thought to be freezers about 35 square feet in size, so big walk-in freezers, visibility worsened, and they were using a right-handed search to locate the door into the stairwell. They went down the stairwell and out onto the loading dock on the Bravo side where they changed air bottles. Once again, they went up the Bravo stairwell, and this time to the 5th floor, and without making contact with victims 1 and 2, came back down to the loading dock. One of the Engine 3 firefighters accompanied the aide from IC2 up the stairwell to the 3rd and 4th floors. They held their breath to stop from the flow of air from the face pieces of their SCBAs so they could better hear and listen for past devices, but they never heard anything. They returned to the loading dock, and the firefighter walked along the outside of Building A's side. He joined up with the firefighter from Ladder 2, the setup man, and another firefighter. The 3 firefighters used an 1 3/4 inch line off an engine in the area to hit fire through one of the windows on the 2nd floor of the Alpha side. It says, note, the 2 firefighters, victims 5 and 6, did not make initial contact with command nor anyone at the scene. They were not seen entering the building. However, according to Central Dispatch transcripts, they may have joined victims 3 and 4 on the 5th floor. So that's the 2 guys that stayed at the rig to keep getting dressed.
And the senior firefighter and a junior firefighter, and they didn't go talk to command, so they didn't get a briefing. They just sort of went on their own and
They just went in, yeah.
Yep.
So 1924 hours, incident command number 2 called for a head count of all the firefighters. It was then determined that 6 firefighters were missing. At 1929, the chief of department called for a 5th alarm. Engines 5 and 10 responded. At 1928 and 29, the victims from engine 3 and ladder 2 were radioed, but no response was ever received from either crew. So I think that's victims 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yep.
Between the hours of 1859 and 1932, so half an hour, Central Dispatch made 8 dispatches regarding problems with radio emergency buttons. Like engine 6, your emergency button is going off. Car 200, your alarm button is going off. Car 200, disable your portable. Engine 12, you have an open cam. Engine 12, your emergency alarm keeps going off and will not allow transmission. Engine 1, radio portable 2, alarm keeps going into alarm and we can't transmit. So everybody's alarm button was going off except for the victims.
Well, engine 6 might have been the victims. I think those last 2 guys. No, maybe not. That was 3 and 2.
Yeah.
You're right.
So 1931.
Sort of like Houston, where they had all the radio problems. But that was newer radios, and that was programming.
Yeah. This is just, I think, buttons getting hit when they're doing work or whatever. 1931 and 1936 hours, the victims from engine 3 and ladder 2 were radioed a second time. And again, no response was received. At 1948 hours, Interior Command radioed the victims from ladder 2 and engine 3 a third time and never received a response. It's going to be one of the worst feelings in the world when you call somebody that is trapped and they don't answer you.
Yep.
So 1949 hours, the crew from engine 8 who had responded on the 4th alarm radioed that they were on the 4th floor and that the structural integrity of the building had been compromised. A thermal imaging camera was brought to the scene by a neighboring fire department and put into service at 1952 hours, but it stopped working at 1955 hours due to intense heat. At 1952 hours, a member from the Fire Investigations Unit reported to the chief of the department that heavy fire, flames of approximately 30 to 40 feet, had just vented through the roof on the Charlie side. At 2000 hours, Interior Command ordered everyone out of the building with a series of short horn blasts were sounded to signal the evacuation. With crews eager to enter the structure to look for their fallen brothers, District Chief McAmee, I think is how I heard it pronounced, physically blocked the door and ordered the building evacuated. As described in the book 3000 Degrees, The True Story of a Deadly Fire and the Men Who Fought It, Chief McAmee knew that allowing more members into the building meant only more deaths, and Worcester wasn't going to lose more firefighters. With this act, Chief McAmee became something of a legend and the epitome of safety-focused command decision-making, and years later, a National Award of Valor was named after him, redefining the meaning of bravery. I think he was Interior Command. So he came out.
I think so.
He put his, like he says, he put his feet and his arms against the doorway, kind of making an X. Guys started walking towards him, and he stood firm, and he said, "We've lost 6. We're not losing any more."
Yeah, that's the story I heard, is that he said we've lost 6 and we're not.
What a decision to make in the moment, eh? Like, I don't know.
But that's the key, and I keep harping on in these podcasts, is safety-focused command decision making.
But it's got to be a very tough decision to essentially write off the 6 guys and say,
"Yep,"
and admit they're gone. We're not getting them.
We're not getting them.
Yeah, crazy. There's a good interview with him on YouTube if you want to find it, by the way.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's kind of like the video that Phoenix made of the Brett Tarver incident in the supermarket, and they sent everybody but the kitchen sink in there to find him, and never could.
mm,
He was back in a freezer or a storage room, and yeah, and they learned a lot from that. That's why Phoenix is so adamant on safety and of assessing the amount of risk versus the amount of potential gain for a warehouse, right? But yeah, so looks like they changed over
yeah.
to offense or
Well,
defensive.
operations changed from an offensive attack, including search and rescue, to a defensive attack with the use of heavy stream appliances. Basically, all their ladders were put up and surrounded and drowned. After the fire had been knocked down, search and recovery operations commenced until recall of box alarm at 22:27 hours on December 11th, 1999.
Wow, like
So,
a week later.
yeah. The victims of this fire came to be known as the Worcester Six. They are firefighter Paul Brotherton, Lieutenant Timothy Jackson, firefighter Jeremiah Lucy, Lieutenant James Lyons, firefighter Joseph McGurk, and Lieutenant Thomas Spencer. I think two of those lieutenants were firefighters and were promoted after their death. The cause of death was released by the Office of the District Attorney. Victims 1 and 5 died as a result of severe thermal injuries and exposure to heat and noxious gases. Victims 2, 3, 4, and 6 died of inhalation of smoke, soot, and hot gases. So, December 9th, 1999. So, this is before they were even done at the scene, but there was a memorial service for the fallen firefighters. Firefighters from Boston came to Worcester to staff all the fire stations and allow the Worcester firefighters to all attend the service. And the service was also attended by President Bill Clinton at the time. So that shows you how big of a deal this was at the time. I mean, 9/11 completely overshadowed it, but it was a pretty big deal at the time. The site where the Worcester Cold Storage Warehouse stood is now a fire station for the city of Worcester, and it has Engine 12, Ladder 1, Rescue 1 there, and some other units. And also, 7 sons of the fallen 6 firefighters also have got on the job. One of them has, I think he has, Paul Brotherton, they said, had 6 sons, and 5 of them got on the fire department. So I couldn't imagine being his widow, where your husband dies as a firefighter, and then 5 years, 6 kids say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do that
Right.
too."
Yeah.
That's got to be. I mean, you hear it all the
We're
time with
gonna talk.
9/11 too. People, their dad died
Right.
and they got on the job after.
Yeah.
Comedian and actor Dennis Leary, who lots of us probably know from Rescue Me, his cousin was one of the Worcester Six, and another one of them was his classmate. He said he started the Leary Firefighters Foundation basically because of this incident, which since then has provided many fire departments with equipment and I think some money too, including a training burn tower in Worcester. They had nothing before that for training. The video I watched today said they just used acquired vacant structures, but now they have uh, typical C-can burn tower that is very common these days. So, any comments or thoughts about the event?
Yeah, I remember it. Seeing it on the news, I guess, because we didn't have internet or anything at the time, and the chief having to make that decision that even though we have 6 guys missing and we've gone searching for them multiple times, things aren't getting any better, and no one else can go in. And that was such a tough deal. And the thing that was a pain, and it's in the recommendations, is this was a vacant building. Although there was reports of people in it, they didn't know that they weren't there. And but they went in, and it was so big. How do you attack such a big fire? And not a lot of fire departments are good at attacking immense fires. And then being a cold storage building, again, it's a specific risk, right? It's going to be well insulated. It's going to be difficult to access. It's not going to have a lot of entrance and egress or windows, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a tough call. And these risks are all over, right? I mean, we might not have buildings that are built in 1905, but there's cold storage buildings and buildings with restricted access all over the place that we don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I was in grade school when this fire happened. I don't remember ever hearing about it, but I somehow got my hands on the book, the 3,000 Degrees book that we mentioned there a couple times, and read it, and couldn't believe what I was reading, and how massive of a fire this must have been, and to lose 6 guys like that. But it's one tidbit, not timbit, tidbit is the reason the book's called 3,000 Degrees is they figure the fire got to 3,000 degrees at one point, and I think it said steel starts to melt at like 1,800 degrees, something like that in the book. But one of the victims,
Right.
when they found him, had a chain around their neck with Saint Florian that did not melt. It was still intact, which was
Yeah,
interesting.
the problem was the tar impregnated cork covered by styrofoam and plastic, right? Once that got going.
Yeah.
And you had the two big stairwells that were open, so providing lots of air.
Well, and
You
it
probably
says
couldn't put
it
enough
says in
water
their
on it.
lots that the conditions weren't that bad, right? They didn't have
Right.
CBAs on; they could see there was no smoke, and then instantly it was like boom, black smoke to the floor. Some of the recommendations we can go over here. It says fire department should ensure that inspections of vacant buildings and pre-fire planning are conducted, which cover all potential hazards, structural building materials, the type and the age, renovations that may have encountered during a fire, so that the incident command will have the necessary structural information to make informed decisions and implement an appropriate plan of attack. I agree. It's nice to always have pre-fire plans.
Well, I added there, especially target hazards or high risk occupancies, vacant buildings like a cold storage in this case, even just site visits. I know the guys used to maybe get bored with it, but I used to push that, I think it was in Fort Saskatchewan, once a quarter, I would divide the crews up into two or three groups, and I would go have them just go visit facilities in the city and have a tour, just a stupid tour. Hi, we're the fire department. We come to look around. And just on the whole, I used to call it learning by osmosis. I mean, it wasn't a study. We didn't provide learning materials, anything. It was just that you'd been there and you'd walked around and you maybe drove through the gate and you knew where security was, or where the whatever building was. You just kind of had a little familiarity. We used to do that a little bit here in Lacombe. Zach could go out to
Yeah.
the various plants or something, or go to the
Yeah.
the new county shop when they built a big new building out in the county or whatever.
Well,
It's important.
absolutely. Like even here, like we have buildings here that scare us, right? So like
Hmm.
I know we have a four-story seniors complex, right? That
The college.
yeah, yeah. Well, over there, right? The complex, the seniors lodge, all this stuff. So I know a few of us have gone out in the past and just walked them, right? Like I know, I think Doug was still on at that time. We went out and walked the seniors complex and made up a plan for that, right? And so it is important to find. And I think at the beginning of the write up here that the what was it, the chief that went by there and pointed it out and said, this building scares me, is like, yeah,
Yeah.
if it scares you, you should absolutely be thinking about, okay, I should actually know what's in here if it scares me that much, where you're pointing it out. So definitely not a bad thing to do for sure.
Recommendation number 2, fire department should ensure that the incident command system is fully implemented at the fire scene. I don't know exactly what they're referring to at this event, other than maybe
I
some crews just like self-deployed.
Well, the interior commander had more than 7 under him.
Oh yeah, that too.
So the span of control was way out to lunch.
Yeah.
And as soon as that happens, then you lose people because they're off doing whatever. The 2 firefighters from the last engine that went in on their own, didn't receive orders, no one knew where they went, they just went, right? IC obviously didn't have control for those people. So incident command system, sector off. In this case, you could have made a division for every floor, had somebody in the stairway controlling that division, and minimize the span. I tell my ICS is 3 to 7 subordinates or units under you, in leaders under you. They can be leaders and they can have another 7 under them. And if it's in a hazardous environment, I usually recommend no more than 5. because you lose track of people. You just can't keep track of it all. So I think that's where they were going in reading the NIOSH reports and stuff, is that they didn't sector off that way. And they had one incident commander and one interior commander, and that was it. They didn't have Alpha Bravo Charlie, or they didn't have on the floors. And so there was, you could say there's a lack of command, which would be incident command system. You didn't follow the procedures.
Number 3, fire department should ensure that a separate incident safety officer, independent from incident commander, is appointed when the event gets big enough, such as during a multiple alarm fire, and should respond automatically to pre-designated fires. Which you can't have pre-designated fires if you don't have pre-plans and know what they are, I guess. But
Right. NFPA says you need a safety ISO. Blue Card actually kind of gone away from the designated ISO, but that sector officer that you're going to do right away to maintain your span of control, like we just talked about, is also in charge of safety for their groups. So they're dual role, they're safety and incident command, which is permissible under ICS. And they didn't have a safety person at this call. No one was in charge of safety.
well, IC was, and you just said that's allowed.
Right, but he's overwhelmed because he had way too many. Maybe he only had one under him, but everybody who wasn't interior was also under IC.
I'm just giving you a shot at Blue Card because
I know.
I don't agree. I think there should be a guy that his job is safety, not you're doing all this stuff and safety. But
yeah, it's debatable. When you take Blue Card, we can argue it.
Can't argue with you about Blue Card because you think it's written in stone and it's the Bible. Fire department should ensure that SOPs and equipment are adequate and sufficient to support the volume of radio traffic at multiple alarm fires.
I think it said they stayed on the same channel the whole time. Yeah, everybody.
And they might not have had a choice, right? Like they may not have multiple channels.
Don't know. 170,000 people, 1999. Give me a break.
It says that. I mean, the emergency buttons kept getting pushed too.
So. Right. But in 1999, with 170,000 people, there's no reason why they couldn't have tactical channels and the dispatch channel.
There's a big reason. It's called money. The same reason they didn't have a burn tower. I mean, just
they had
saying.
Adequate staff. Yeah, it's all priorities, right?
Fire department should ensure that incident command always maintains close accountability for all personnel at the fire scene. That's probably referring to at least the 2 guys, maybe more crews that just kind of self-deployed and did their own thing. It is.
They had 4 or 5 ladders, including a tower, and they didn't have a thermal imaging camera. They had to borrow one from mutual aid.
They didn't have 2 radio channels either. I don't think they had much money, Paul. Like they just didn't. The whole fire department didn't have one tick camera. And it didn't matter anyways because the one they used worked for 5 minutes. It says fire department should use guide ropes and tag lines for searching in large areas, especially looking for lost or downed firefighters. I mean, we have them on our trucks, and I never ever see the search lines used. I think it's always an afterthought. But I could understand saying no, we're going to use them in a big warehouse looking for downed people when you already know that something bad has happened in here. I don't know if any fire departments really use them as like on their initial primary search, but.
Yeah, no, not initial, but definitely moving on. And I know one of the guys, actually, the Blue Card guy here in Alberta, like the licensee, he used to teach wide area search with taglines and stuff. I can see it in a cold smoke environment, like a warehouse with sprinklers. The fire's been controlled. We have to search this place for whatever reason. Or in this case here, like, going at the door, having a tagline, going in with the tagline, especially because they didn't take hose lines in everywhere they went, so which again maybe wasn't a good idea, but because they couldn't follow it out. Years ago, one of the departments that used to be one of my customers and I worked with a lot, they used to have a box that they made. It was kind of like a big wooden Pelican case, and it had a loudspeaker and a bright light on it, and it would make a tone or sounds, and they would put that at the door with a battery, and it would be at the doorway, and that was a beacon to guide crews back out to the doorway.
Yeah,
was actually something they carried on all the trucks.
I've heard of people using the traffic pucks, the LED lights that you're
Right,
supposed to
right,
put like on top of a pylon or something on a road at a
right,
traffic accident. Put those
right.
on a windowsill or inside a window or in a doorway, and it shines a
Yep.
light.
And this thing actually had a speaker and made a noise, like a tone of some
Yeah,
sort. I remember asking, like, what was that? And they made it themselves. It was something that I don't know if anybody ever sold those, but I know that they made it themselves. It was Saskatoon Fire
these
used to have
guys
them on all the
these guys
trucks.
at the doorway couldn't hear the pass alarm, so I'm sure the people at the pass alarms couldn't hear what was the doorway in this.
Well, remember, a pass alarm is small, and in 1999, pass alarms weren't very loud. NFPA changed the rulings in the 2000s for pass alarms. That's why they're on the back of your SCBA now, so that they couldn't be muffled by lying on them, and also they had to meet a certain loudness. In fact, I remember some of the manufacturers were people were complaining because don't do a demonstration because they're so loud. They were in the almost painful dBA range, 90 whatever dBA, and that's why they moved them to the back of the SCBA so that no matter where you're lying or how you're lying on it, you can't muffle it. But back in '99, they
Mhm.
wouldn't have had that. So we've
Fire,
we've got better.
yeah, well, it's good. Fire department should ensure that a rapid intervention team is established and in position upon arrival. I didn't
And,
hear once in this whole thing that they had anybody doing RIT.
no,
And
no,
it's my thought, my opinion that at a working fire it should be an automatic designation in your response that like the,
somebody.
the fifth ladder or the third whatever, just whoever you want to pick should be your RIT every time. And some departments like to leave stuff like that up to the incident command, and for me it's just nice. Get it, don't even make it something that command doesn't have to worry about, because they got lots to worry about. So just make it you're automatically assigned. Some departments wait till like they don't send it on the initial, hey, we got a structure fire, but when somebody gets there and says we have a working fire, then they get added to the dispatch. And I'm a
Yeah,
fan
some of the
where the whole time we're going in as RIT or the fast or whatever, and
some
you
of the
know.
departments, bigger departments, say that the guys, when it was pre-assigned, people would purposely delay their arrival to not be assigned RIT because they often RIT doesn't do anything, right? So that's why some departments prefer to assign it as a task by command. Um, but yeah, and remember, like some jurisdictions, there's a rule, within 10 minutes or within before you send a second crew inside, you need to have a fast or RIT team established, and they size up the building and get their tools. And yeah, it's too bad at this call that they didn't have RIT. I guess they would have been sent to that fourth floor, the first guys that called the Mayday, which they did send a team up there. They weren't
Yeah,
designated as they were told to go rescue them, but
yeah. That I mean, to your point about crews delaying getting there because they want to be the fourth engine instead of the third engine. That's why I like the system where when the first in units say we have a working fire, another crew is dispatched at that time only to be RIT, right? Like you can't delay a response because your other option is you don't go at all, right?
right,
The only
right.
reason you've even been assigned to this call is to be RIT. And I mean, you got to kind of check your thoughts on being a firefighter if you're delaying a response so you're not what could be the most important.
Well, you know
There's gonna be
how
lots of fires though. One day you're RIT, the next day you're not. Like it all
I
evens out.
know. You know
That's
how some
I
departments
know.
are.
Next recommendation is implement an overall health and safety program, such as one recommended by NFPA 1500.
I copied this right from the report, and at the time of the incident, a formal written safety and occupational health and safety program was not available at this department. Since the incident, though, they have developed structural firefighting program, addresses operational tactics, strategies within incident command, rapid intervention, search and rescue rope procedures, thermal imaging technology, radio communications on the fire ground, emergency procedures, building construction, and high-rise fires. So it looks like they've got a well-rounded program as a result of what happened here. Obviously late, but hey, at least they're doing it, which is good.
Well, even looking through this incident that happened, lack of Maydays, like Mayday probably wasn't a term until when, roughly 2000s?
I think it was a
in the
term
fire
before
service
that.
or emergency
It
traffic.
was just wasn't trained on.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and to which more the point, right? It wasn't trained on a Mayday.
It's
Like
still
you had an
not
emergency
trained on.
traffic situation
Unless
go
you
on
take
in the
blue
early.
card or emergency scene
Absolutely.
management or something like that, it's often not trained on formally. It's not in, firefighter level 1, 2, 3. It is sort of in fire officer 3, 4. 2 and 3, not really, is it?
Calling
I
Mayday?
mean, it's part of that emergency scene management, but it's not Mayday procedures.
But even so, like when we were looking at this earlier, right? There was an incident where they unofficially called in emergency traffic, but there was no official, right? And I'm sitting there as Doug was reading. It's like, why did they just evacuate the building at that point? If it's holes in the floor and there's buildings untenable, it's like that's.
But
air alarm,
emergency
right?
traffic is
The
to
building,
clear
right?
the
Once again, I
radio.
wasn't there, so
It's not a Mayday.
When
it is. I know, and
I
I'm
was
just
going to
saying
say
that's
when
just
Zach
like
stopped there that people can't even agree on what term to use. Some departments want to say emergency traffic, and other say like it should just be universal. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
Right.
Everybody knows what that means. You go pick somebody off the street, then you say, "What does Mayday mean?" And they're going to know what it means. And
the firefighter, the person experiencing the emergency, calls Mayday. The command calls emergency traffic, which usually results in dispatch issuing a tone over the radio to say there's an emergency, requesting everybody to shut up so that they can deal with the emergency. That's how it works, right? The firefighter calls Mayday, not the commander.
Well, anybody can call a Mayday, though. It doesn't.
Well, yeah, if they're in trouble. If I'm having a heart attack in my Chiefs buddy, I'll call a Mayday.
If the roof collapses, command can call the Mayday when the roof collapsed. It doesn't have to be somebody inside, and you don't always have to call a Mayday for yourself. You can call a Mayday for anybody.
Somebody else. Sure.
Right? Like it's.
Right.
Yeah, if somebody's unaccounted for, right?
But like I mean, to what you just said there, Zach, I think that emergency traffic broadcast happened after the guys from Rescue 1 were already missing, so they couldn't just say everybody out.
It's true
because the building's unsafe because they already had guys to go find.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
The next recommendation is fire departments should consider using a marking system when conducting searches. I think lots of them train on it. I don't know if they use it on routine structure fires. The place I see it used the most is on like disasters where you get you get 4 different FEMA teams that are searching and they're not both there, right? Like team 1 is here for 2 weeks and they go home and team 2 shows up. Well, team 1 has to make their markings right so that team 2 knows what's going on. And it's always the X with sometimes there's a P for primary. And what some training I got was you put a P, you put 1 slash means you're doing it. The other slash means you're done it, right? And that's
lots of departments carry those inner tube things with 2 holes in them to cover the door.
Yeah.
And you put it over the latch while you're searching, and then you put both sides on the outside when the search is done, right? Or the IFSTA used to sell little orange things. I'm looking for one. I got one on my desk here that you can hang on the door. Room search.
Departments that just
chalk.
You carry chalk, yeah, and you can just mark
chalk, yeah. And I mean, we should do that anyway. You get an apartment building like that apartment building we did, Doug. You guys broke into like 8 suites or something, I think, to wake people up. Well, that's where you mark it. But, and I tried getting the department to do that, but
I also wonder if, like,
on deaf ears.
Years ago, 25 years ago, I mean, when I started there in Lacombe, not everybody had a radio. And that's kind of changing where maybe people feel like we don't need to mark up the wall all the time because we just say on the radio, like, the primary search on the first floor is done. and then everybody knows, and you don't need the marking. But
It's chalk. Who cares?
yeah. Fire departments should identify dangerous vacant buildings and affix warning placards to entrance doorways or other openings where firefighters may enter. I mean, I think that's a lot more common now than it was back then. I know Chicago has a program. I don't know it in depth, but I know they have a program for marking other vacant buildings. But to me, it still comes back to the like, just because it's vacant to the tax man, there's no one living there officially, doesn't mean it's empty. And it's up to me, like you just need to know your district. You need to know some buildings. I don't know, because just because you put a warning placard doesn't mean you say we're not going in there. Because
No, that's
vacant
not what it's
fires
saying.
start for some reason. I mean, there's no electrical, there's no utilities, but the fire still started. So that's a sign that somebody could be in there, right?
I think it draws that Baltimore thing
Yeah.
right out. Because Baltimore had a pilot project years ago. It died, ended. It ended, and then they had that fire in January last year, and the building wasn't marked, and it resulted in several line of duty deaths, and now the uh, families of the firefighters that died are suing the city for not continuing with that program. One of the recommendations in the report was they need a program to mark vacant buildings. And it's not that, we don't think anybody's in there. It's that it's vacant. It could be damaged. It could be,
Sure. Yeah.
falling down. I mean, also anybody in there is not, they're possibly people that are squatting or whatever. Not that that means anything. Zach's leaving for a fire call.
I think even better than putting up a placard is just have a pre-plan or have a note in your dispatch system where dispatch can announce to crews, hey, this is a vacant building, because those
Right.
placards aren't going to last unless it's like super heavy duty attached to the thing. But it might
Right.
not be
Yeah.
there. It might get covered up with something where if there's
Yeah.
a note on the file on the address and dispatch, when they can come on the air to the responding units and just say, this is a dangerous building, be careful, that would help. The next recommendation, fire department should ensure that officers enforce and firefighters follow the mandatory mask rule per guidelines. I think that's getting better in today's
Yeah.
more dangerous plastic smoke and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
People are getting better at wearing their SCBA all the time. You don't have the old guys that all this is just for big fires and stuff like that.
Right.
I think that's getting
That's
better.
kind of over now. Yep.
Yeah. Fire department should explore the use of ticks again. I think in the last
That's a
25
time
years.
thing.
I mean,
Yep.
Worcester probably has a tick on every rig they have now.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Manufacturers and organizations should conduct research into refining existing and developing new technology to track the movement of firefighters. That's also happened a lot since this, where they try to sell you
still
on
haven't.
programs anyways. I don't know how reliable
I don't.
they are, but
Yeah, I don't know if they've ever got it down to tracking as well as they need to. I know several manufacturers have been working on all kinds of systems. I don't know that there's one out there that works yet, um, especially in a multi-story building.
yeah, I've heard lots of them say the problem is making things 3D. They can
Yeah,
tell
yeah,
you
because
they
you
can
go
tell
up
you
and down. Yep,
2D where they are, but they can't
that's
tell
easy.
you
Yep,
3D where they are.
yep, exactly.
Well, that's the end of the recommendations there, Paul. We can't get Zach's final thoughts because he's off saving the world. But
Yep.
any final thoughts from you?
No, it was a groundbreaking moment in the fire service that showed the risks and the dangers and how we deal with them while we're still working on it. But we've ticked off a few of these recommendations in the fire service as general, which is good, and we just need to keep these firefighters that gave their lives for this fire and what they did and lessons learned in our minds moving forward, which is why we're here.
Yeah, I agree, and I like the fact that we're doing some of these reports that are, I don't know, 25 years ago, rounding up, and because there's firefighters that are on fire departments today that weren't even born when this fire happened, and
Right.
they might have like, why do we got to carry the tick to every call I go to, or why are we using these stupid search ropes or something? And when they hear a podcast like this or review fires like this, then they realize like, oh, there's a reason why we do the things we do, because people that didn't do it died, and now we're trying not to die. So it's,
Why do I have to take ICS training?
yeah, well, that's a whole other. We could have a drinking game with our podcast. But every time Paul mentions ICS or blue card, you take a shot, but nobody ever got to the end sober.
Ha ha ha. All right.
Well, yeah, thanks everybody for listening. That's the end of this one. We encourage you to give us a like or a thumbs up or a star or whatever on your app of choice for listening. We'd love some recommendations on calls that you'd like us to touch on. We'd love some feedback on the podcast we have. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, whatever. Just tell us something. And yeah, stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.